Olá, bem-vinda ou bem-vindo ao Tekya Talks, um podcast sobre carreira, sucesso e desenvolvimento pessoal. Perguntas desconfortáveis para pessoas inquietas. Junta-te a nós nesta jornada pessoal e profissional. Welcome to Tekya Talks, a podcast about career, success, and personal development, where we make uncomfortable questions to answer restless people. My name is Mariana, and I am the founder of Tekya, where our mission is to help you make your work a tool to build your dream life. Today, I have with me someone with 30 years of work experience, and I am really excited to bring her here. Someone that witnessed the development of technology since its early days and can share with our audience, you, a perspective that not many people can say they have. From IT project director to consultant to VP, Thene has done a marvelous journey in her both professional and personal life, which brings us to today. With her, we will explore the ups and downs of a career journey and drink from the wisdom of someone that moved to a new country, a new career, and a new life. Thin, welcome to Tekya Talks. Ready to blow some minds today?
I'm ready, Mariana. Let's go.
Nice, nice. I am especially excited today because we didn't speak for a while. And today, I think we have here some special questions, and I'm really, really excited to have you. So, thank you firsthand for accepting the challenge and my invite.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I think this will be a lot of fun.
Yes, yes, indeed. So usually I do a little bit of talking to our guests, and even the questions that I gave the opportunity to my students to bring. The first one was from the beginning. What was your idea? So I was checking your LinkedIn, and you graduated in computer science back in 1985. What was your idea back then? Your dreams, or I don't know, your expectations somehow?
Yes, that was a long time ago. Oddly enough, I was dreaming last night about going back to my original college. Isn't that funny? Probably because we were going to talk. Yeah, when I left high school, I had tried to enroll in a 6-year medical program that was at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And I had passed the technical exams, but I had not passed the final check because they only take 100 students back then. I don't know about now. They only took 100 students. And so I was quite disappointed, and I thought, oh, I'll go to the same college and just see if I could get in the next year. And it was my second semester, spring semester of the first year, when I ran into my first computer program, my first computer language class. It was Fortran. And I thought, oh, this like lines up to my brain. And some people found it very hard. I found it pretty easy. I was always a math and science kid anyway. And so I started into that program pretty early, before there even was a computer science program. It wasn't even on the books yet. And I stayed with it through at UMKC for the rest of the time. I graduated a little bit longer than 4 years because I actually took out time to do 2 co-op programs. So I went to work and got college credit for going to work. And even back then, I was looking for a career that that made sense to me, that wasn't hard, but was challenging. And I wanted a career, and don't take this the wrong way, but I wanted a career where I could stand on my own, right? Where I didn't have to get married. I didn't have to have a husband. So this is still the super very early 1980s. And I didn't want to have to depend.
You think you felt like an exception?
Not completely unique, but it was still the early days. Okay.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Like you still couldn't really buy a house or get a checking account without a husband. So anyway, that was a long time ago. anyway, so I wanted a career where I could support myself. My parents never had a lot of money, so I wanted to make sure I could support myself without them, and have a career in which I thought, as a woman, I could be successful, I could do well, and not have to depend on the timing of getting married. So that was really the early ideas, and it worked out. I could see that I was having some early success in the classes. I would do well. I'd get high scores in the computer coding classes, and then I took some of the design classes and such, and I was still doing pretty well. So I thought this is probably going to work out pretty well.
All right, all right. So what were your first steps into like the real markets? Because we only have the idea of the IT market now, right? Which is booming, bustling, new names every day. But I guess it was not like that, right? Back then.
There were some very early successful companies, right? So IBM was hot. All right. Now there were no personal computers yet. They had what were called small business computers. And so actually the first co-op job, the job that I took while I was still in college in my junior year, was at IBM for 4 months. So, I had to go buy my first suits and learn how to dress for success, which was the hot book back then, and color code and all of those things to look like a professional woman.
Wow.
And so I went to IBM for about 4 months. And so I really jumped into the corporate environment,
Okay.
feet first, right? Um, and then, so then I went back to school for another semester. And then the second and third co-op program I took was doing coding work for the Department of Agriculture for the US government. So not quite as corporate,
Mhm.
but a very different, it's a government job, which in those days, a government job for the US is kind of like a government job for Portugal, right? It's still the government.
Yeah.
It still works at a very calm pace. There was not the press of the IBM job. But I did really well at it. I went back twice for 2 different 9-month runs at the Department of Agriculture. And even then, I met a few women who were very successful in those roles. One of the women I worked with at the Department of Agriculture was actually getting close to retiring, and she had started with the Army or Navy when there were still tubes.
Wow.
So she had 30 or 40 years at the Department of Agriculture. So I I felt like it was a career where I could, really succeed, even though I was a woman and I was smart, and it looked like I could be successful.
All right.
And now I've lost complete track of your original question.
Well, that was the question actually. Like, how was it to enter the professional market?
Right. And so what happened then was I came back after my second round with the Department of Agriculture, and I still had technically another semester or two of schooling left. But I thought, I have almost 2 years of experience. I'll bet you I can go get a real job.
A real job.
A real job. And so, so oddly enough, we had a presentation at the school computer department monthly meeting of headhunters, which is all we called them back then. And there was only two of them that I knew of in the whole city, and they had showed us a chart of job titles. And so I contacted them and I said, look, I have all this experience. I haven't graduated yet, but I think you can help me get a job. And they did. They did. So I went to work before I got out of college for a company that was actually a farmers co-op. So there were 12 states in the middle of the U.S. who were automating and helping farmers to come together as an organization. And they handled fuel and food and feed and financing and things. And they had a computer department. So I went to work for them, and that was my first job. I eventually finished college kind of part-time in the back end, which is why it took me a little longer. But it was a really good way to jump in.
Awesome, awesome. All right, all right. Well, it's not that different than what I was expecting, which is nice, nice. One of the main questions that our students asked was if you feel like the rhythm has increased a lot since those early days, or if it didn't, if it kind of some companies are faster, some companies are more like calmer, as you were saying. How did you feel throughout the years and the decades? The rhythm inside technology, the sector.
For my experience, the rhythm was always fast.
Okay.
There was always the next thing was coming on. At that first full-time job that I took, when I arrived, the excuse me, the database guys had just come back from Atlanta, Georgia, I think. And IBM had been teaching them DB2. So we didn't have relational databases yet, but that was part of the transition in my first couple of years there. And it was always a push. Everything was a push, right? And I went from that company to work for a large US airline. And again, it was a heavy push. We were updating and upgrading to a new platform for reservations and frequent flyers, and looking at strategic data models and how did we sort of pull all the pieces of the company together. Nobody knew anything about business intelligence and that kind of fancy reporting layers yet, but the concept was kind of there. But it was always a push. And then I went to work for a big telecom company and stayed there for 15 years. And
Mm.
everything was always a push. It
Oh.
never was slow. In the government, okay, in the government it's slow, but not in the normal corporate sector in America. It's never been slow.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's very similar here, right? We had some speaking with people that are working for public entities, and they usually say the same thing. And sometimes it's an option, right? If you prefer the push, or if you prefer a calmer phase in your life, and which also
Right,
depends on our personal journey as well, right?
right.
So looking back, this is my own curiosity, which I really like to explore this part. Can you recall some of the best moments you had in your career, like those moments where you feel like, wow, thrilled, I really like this? Can you
Yeah.
tell us some story or some of those moments?
Um, I think one of the first moments I remember was in the early days of moving to the telecom company. Um, so in those days, my job was to be a data analyst or a data architect. So I did a lot of the early requirements gathering, what now we call a business analyst. We had data analysts. So we did a lot of the early interviewing of users and clients to see what they would want and building data models to really understand the whole picture. And when I went to work for the telecom company, they about a year into it, they started a really big project. We thought it would take us about a year to gather requirements because this was going to be a platform for kind of a whole integrated database for tracking all of the switches, the connections, the circuits, facilities, and then the customers, kind of the whole kit and caboodle, right? So I was on this project to begin gathering requirements, and what we wanted to do was have a facilitated joint design session with, let's say, 10, 20 of the core smart telecom guys who had been there for a really long time, right? And trust me, they were all men. Um, and we needed a facilitator, right? And I was not a huge public speaker, and I was pretty nervous standing in front of humans, but we had done some of the prep work. And one night, these two guys who were on the project with me, they came to me and they said, "We think you should be the facilitator." Now, mind you, this was going to be a 3-week JAD session. And, and after a whole lot of conversation and hesitation and stuff, I said yes. And that was sort of the start of my journey into whiteboards, pens, sticky notes, and such. And I think, it was a bit of bravery. It was a bit of trusting that someone else saw something in me. it was a bit of recognizing that, yeah, when I'm in a meeting with a group of 6 people, I'm often the one who takes the pen and gets to the whiteboard and just I start drawing things. I'm super visual that way. And I think that helped keep me interested and keep me connected and engaged at that company for another 13 years. And eventually, they're the ones who took me into being a director and a leader and such like that. So that was a big milestone moment.
Wonderful. What made you decide, no, I'm gonna do this? Because it was scary, right?
Yeah, it was scary. I think it was their trust in me, their faith in me, a little bit of faith in myself, I suppose. And knowing that I had another army of people. I wasn't the only data analyst. I had colleagues. I knew that together, if my feet got sore, I could sit down and they could stand up and, kind of take the pen. I knew that there were people who were going to they were going to play the scribe role. They were going to take notes. And so I knew I wasn't alone. And that's probably the role of every facilitator and every leader is we really, although we happen to be standing in front of the room, we're really not alone,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
You always have, that there's some hands there
yeah,
behind you. All right.
yeah.
One of the questions that our students also shared with us, I'm not sure if this was a thing back then, but I know this is a thing now, which is a little bit putting the ownership of the agility, the facilitator, the scrum as we have it now, on top of a developer role, of a QA role. Do you think this could be an option? This was an option back then, but it's not now. Like now, they are separate roles. You have a lot of experience in this agility area. How do you look at it? Do you think they should be split? They can be combined?
Mm. Oh, there's a political question, isn't there?
Go with your gut. So what does your experience tells you? What works the best?
Yeah, I think there are different moments in a team's life.
Okay.
And I think when a team is earlier in its development, if you think about forming, storming, norming, performing, when a team is earlier in its life, I think having a separate set of eyes and a separate voice as a scrum master, agile coach is much more helpful because um, partly because the team hasn't gelled, right? The team doesn't have its own dynamic yet. And sometimes because the players in the team are young, they just haven't been in a corporate environment, or they haven't been in a team, or they haven't done a lot of this work yet. So it sort of depends on the age of the team and on the age of the players. So I think that having someone with a little bit of wisdom and a separate objective set of eyes and a separate objective voice is super helpful. If you get to a point in a team's life where maybe only one person is going in and out of the team every 6 months, so the team itself is fairly stable, I think there are moments in a team's life when other team members can play a normal scrum master role. What's the daily stand-ups and things like that. But I think when a team shifts back into either high modes of change or high modes of pressure, when team dynamics and behavior gets a little less optimal, it's sometimes helpful, I think, to again bring in an outside voice.
Yeah, yeah, that's a wonderful answer. Actually, the maturity tells a lot, right? And I think,
Yeah.
especially as a leader, I felt that a lot. Which is, in the beginning, you need to create that team feeling. Everyone is going to the same island on the same boat. The
Mhm.
dynamic, the meetings. Why are we doing this? Even the respect about the meeting, right? Because in the
Mhm.
beginning, daily stand-ups, people are there for 30 minutes, and that's fine, and they need to understand it's not fine, right?
Mhm.
But then you almost make yourself redundant. And when you
Mhm.
start to feel redundant, I think it's that sign of, okay, maybe they are good on their own, right?
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
yeah, if things are optimal, maybe we can let go a little bit and make it more dispersed about that responsibility. Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome. All right. um, One of the things that people noticed also was that you changed a lot, company to company. You have a lot of companies in your journey, and
Mhm.
nowadays I think there's still the doubt if it's good, and people will look at us like, yeah, she always wanted more and do better and go, 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 or she cannot stay in one company for long. How do you look at it now? What were like your criteria to decide it's time to change or it's not time to change?
Mm. So I think I was doing pretty good on my career journey of staying somewhere through the time when I worked for Sprint, which was the big US telecom. So I stayed at Sprint for 15 years. And Sprint was very forward thinking. They had a lot of female leadership. They did a lot of training of their leadership team, really of everybody. They had a Sprint University for a long time. So they trained everybody from the people who had to go out and cut fiber lines and install fiber, all the way up to senior leadership. Um, so I felt very, um, I had a lot of training accessible to me. I had a lot of champions and support from my bosses. And they always found new things for me to do. When I sort of ran out of a project, they found me a new project. When I was sort of at the senior level of my technical skills, they very gingerly moved me into a leadership role and then another leadership role and sent me off to Nashville, Tennessee. And so they did a really, really good job of caring with me for my career.
Awesome.
That doesn't really exist anymore. A lot of companies don't do that anymore. So when I left Sprint, and that was sort of a joint decision. They were going to close down the office in Nashville, and I wasn't going to go back to Kansas City. So, and I'd been there 15 years. It was kind of time, right? After that, that's when this roller coaster of jobs really started. And I think two things were happening. One is my tolerance for companies that I felt weren't caring for their employees. My tolerance went down, and I was getting older, right? So I was over 40 by that point. So my tolerance went down. The skills of the company went down. Some of those were consulting gigs, and in that case, it's not their job to take care of me, right? But I found good projects. I got out and about. I did some new things. I worked in new industries. And so I liked that part of consulting. I was a little less tied to the company. And then sometimes I would find a company that I liked and I would go in as an employee. And sometimes those worked out and sometimes didn't. There's, things that happen behind the scenes that you can never tell exactly from LinkedIn about why
Sure.
one left a company. Some of those were good exits and some of them weren't. Um, and they don't all, they're not all stories that need to be shared, but I think my point when I talked to a group from Brazil about a month ago, and my point is you don't have to make a decision for life. You get to choose when it feels like you're not cared for, when it feels like your skills aren't being used, or when it feels like your value system isn't lining up with what the company is saying. And if you have, not everybody has, but if you have the option to go, then move on, right? Learn what you can learn. Learn how to tell the story of what you learned, because that's important. And move on to learn something new. Because, one of the things they taught us at Sprint, the very first time Sprint, the telecom, ever did a layoff was in the mid 90s or so. And one of the very first booklets they gave us was basically a booklet that basically said, you own your career.
Yeah,
You
true.
drive it. We're not in charge of your career. You figure out what you want. You drive your career. And I've never forgotten that one. So I honestly don't think if you can make it 2 years, 3 years at a company, and you've sort of done good, you've left behind a good legacy there, but something isn't matching anymore, move on. If you can stay and you feel, empowered and you feel taken care of and they're giving you new opportunities and your value system lines up, stay, keep going. I don't think that either way's a right or wrong answer.
Yeah, yeah, true. That's true. I think people are still very, um, they feel insecure there of just moving to a new company and then another one and then another one, because somehow there's the idea that you will be seen as like a jumper that goes everywhere. But well,
Mm,
I share that vision. I moved a lot already, and I
mm-hmm.
think if it's the right criteria in your mind, if it makes sense, then why not,
Yeah,
right? Not running
yeah.
away from something, just looking for the next.
I will say in this environment in the last year,
Hmm.
it's very messy. So I would probably guide people to sort of jump very carefully these days, because the next thing is, from what I see on LinkedIn about the length of time it takes people to get a job. Then they get a job, and before they even start, they've been let go again, or they're there for a month and then something happened. That is like a crazy environment. I've never seen it be like that. So maybe this is a weird little anomaly. Hopefully it will go away. And, anyway.
Yeah, I think we tech also passed through like a huge bubble, and things slowed down in the last 2 years, more or less. But it was really getting crazy, especially around salaries. So I see it as a very positive thing, and I do believe that now we can have like a higher standards when we go to a new company, and the company also has higher standards.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are good, and we make a change and we can really interview the company, right? Because it's not just them interviewing us. If we get to do a good job there, and if they also do a good job on their side, and then we might find a place where, well, they will care about the people, they will care about the product, they will care about the impact,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually get our purpose, which is one of the big words that we have
Yeah.
now, right? And I think we'll get there
Yeah.
also in this conversation. All right, all right. So you spoke about some of the struggles that you had in your career, and at some point you decided to move to Portugal.
Mm,
What made you start thinking like, maybe I should go to the other side of the Atlantic?
mm. Yeah. The first inkling that we got to move abroad was when I was in my master's program at Vanderbilt University in Nashville in 2003, 2004. So that was what I did when I left Sprint. And Vanderbilt was or is still, a very entrepreneurial school, especially the School of Engineering, which is where I went. It's very entrepreneurial. And so I thought, oh, we could move abroad and we could start a company somewhere else. And at the moment, the idea was Italy.
Okay.
So I actually made that research part of my master's thesis, was could you move abroad and build a business in Italy? And basically the answer was no.
Wow.
Yeah. So, good I did the research before we just
Yeah.
jumped, right? But I don't think that little seed ever left us. And my husband and I, we don't have kids. And so travel's always been kind of a thing for us. And we love to sort of immerse and learn the other culture, maybe learn a bit of the language, and really sort of imagine ourselves in that space. And then when we got to kind of the 2010, 2015 or so, somewhere in there, we started to do more research on where could we go if we wanted to leave the US. For me, the US was becoming very materialistic and very pricey, and it just didn't feel like the place that I wanted to spend retirement. I was still years away from that, but it just wasn't feeling like a good match.
Okay.
So we did a bunch of research. We considered some places in the Caribbean. We considered some places in Mexico or Costa Rica. We actually went to Ecuador for 2 weeks to consider that location, and we were close on Ecuador.
Yeah, it's a nice
Um,
country. I like that.
but we happened to meet a woman there and had lunch and talked for 6 hours, I think. And she talked to us about what we were looking for. And she's the one who suggested Portugal.
Okay.
And so that was 2017. I was already operating as a consultant, so I was looking for somewhere. I wanted to see if I could come to Portugal for 2 weeks or so, kind of as on a business reason, and partner that with a being at research trip. So we came to one of the tech conferences in Porto in May of 2018, and really enjoyed it. It matched our search criteria because we do like to travel inside of Europe primarily. We're not really Malaysia, Southeast Asia, that kind of area. We're not huge into South America, so that was good. So it was a good match. Of course, it mentally it sort of had the vision of this dream we had for Italy. It still has, it has the older culture and the history, and so it was a good fit. And so we made the decision, and we came in the fall of 2018.
Okay, okay. So I practically met you right away, right? I think we probably met in 2018, 2019 maximum, I think, because then it was
Yeah,
COVID. So yeah, it
yeah.
was right in the beginning. Interesting, because when I met you, I felt like you were here for years already.
Oh,
I don't know, you were inside of everything. We met in several events here in Braga.
hmm,
So
yeah,
for me, it was like, no, she's been living here for the last 10 years. And now
yeah.
you're telling it was
Y-
very early.
you all in Braga, in the agile community and the tech community in Braga, were all very welcoming to me. It was really nice. I had reached out to a few people even before we left the U.S. I had looked up and found that Agile Connect, the monthly
Yeah.
meeting that was there. And I had reached out and said, "Look, I'm coming. I don't speak Portuguese. If I come to the meeting, will you guys speak English?" And so right? But then I showed up, and everybody was so nice, and I got to know a lot of folks up there. And we had 18 months or so before COVID shut us all down, so
Yeah,
it was
yeah, it was
nice.
short. Yeah, but it was awesome. And it was the time where I moved to tech as well, 2017. So for me, it was a blessing because I really learned a lot there. Um, okay, so when you moved to Portugal, you were already working as a consultant for different companies, or
Hmm.
okay, so you could
Yeah.
work remotely to them.
Yeah. Well, at the time, I was working for a company that had project managers as consultants, contractors, and
Right.
the project managers were all over the world, so they really didn't care where I lived. So
Okay.
that was perfect. Yes. Um, and I ended up having to start a company in Portugal to support our visa process,
Okay.
um, which then gave me the opportunity to do the job after that consulting gig. So I did
Yes.
that. The next ones were done through my own company.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you still mixed some consultancy projects, some full-time jobs because you were here for 2018, what, 6 years or five
Yeah,
years working?
yeah. We've been here 6 years now total. Yeah, I did some consulting gigs. The one I came with, and then after that one, I did some on my own. And then COVID came, but I was
Mm.
still able to do some contracts remotely in the year of COVID. Not a lot, but a few. And then at the end of 2020, then I took the full time job as an employee with Talkdesk, and I stayed with them for 2.5 years. So
All
yeah.
right, all right. Awesome, awesome. Lovely journey. Um, One thing that I had here, which is a topic that I think you guys really planned it. Not sure if since very early or not, but retirement. And I remember hearing you speak about financial freedom back when we were at those events. Is this something that you always thought about? Was it something you learned on your professional, personal journey? When did you start thinking about this more?
Mm. Well, as I was as I was a single young working woman, the message in the U.S. even in the 80s was to begin saving for your own retirement.
Okay.
And the big corporations had there's a mechanism in the U.S. called a 401k. they have a mechanism for helping to deposit money for your retirement into personal accounts. So they're not necessarily tied to the company, or when you leave the company, you get them back.
Okay.
And so that intention of financial independence starts early in the US. And the mechanism through the big companies, there are these mechanisms in the banking industry that allow us to do that. I don't see that as much here in Portugal. So
Yeah, not
that's,
so much. We are trying, but it's still in the beginning. Yeah.
yeah. So these individual retirement accounts allow us to prepare for that. Um, and then I also, somewhere maybe 10 years ago or so, we started with a financial planner to help us, build my husband and I, to build a more integrated plan that says, okay, well, when do you think you want to retire? And how much money will you get from Social Security? And, it really, the process of getting this financial planner was really a way for us to think about those details. Do you really need two cars? Or when you move abroad, do you think you might not need two cars? And how much do you think you're going to travel? It's kind of a requirements gathering thing, right? It makes you think about these details, and you really think about life and what's important. And that's really, you need to start that before the day you want to retire, right? You need to prepare for what you want life to look like. Partly on the financial side, but also on the what do you want to do, right? When I got closer to thinking I wanted to retire fairly young, so in the U.S. you can do that at 62, given that you have enough years banked in the Social Security system. So I made it to my 42 years, and I made it to the triggers that they allow you to do that. But you really want to think about, what do you want to do, right? I'm not old. Okay, I'm old to some of you, but I'm not old.
I still have a lot of
Um,
energy. I want to do
yeah,
things, right? Yeah, I want to enjoy life.
exactly.
Sure.
And I've spent so many years working from home and working in tech and working in sort of the working world, not necessarily corporate, but the life that I lived through LinkedIn and through Zoom, and that I didn't want all that to go away.
Hmm.
That is part of what keeps my brain active and things that I think about, right? So I wasn't ready to like shift completely off a computer and go to gardening. It's just not my thing. Um, so, so you have to think about, what do you want this life to look like? How active do you want to be in volunteering? Do you want to start a charity? Do you want to work in charity? So for me, I started doing a wheel of life exercise. And what did I want all of those segments of my life to look like?
Right. Was it hard to picture that back then? Because now maybe it seems easier, but back then.
Um, no. What happened was in 20, somewhere around 2015 or 16, somewhere in there, Roger and I left Missouri in the Midwest, where we all grew up and got married, and we moved to Phoenix, Arizona. And we weren't sure if this was going to be our retirement location, but it was a beautiful place, and we had friends there, and it was a very different climate than in the Midwest, right? So it was a lot of fun things to learn. What happened was we moved into a rental house that was inside of a retirement community.
Hmm.
And what became very obvious was, you can retire early and you can be active. These people were very busy. They had social lives. They went to the gym. They played tennis. They rode their bicycle. They went hiking. They had charities. They had second careers. And so I was 10 years away from retirement still, and now longing to have that opportunity to do that. So for me, I think that created a draw to retire early and sort of paint my own life on my own terms with the things that I cared about.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, that's why examples and speaking with people and learning about their own journeys, so I don't know, mind opening, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
inspiring. Yeah,
yeah, what you're sharing now will for sure inspire a lot of people. For sure, for sure. Because sometimes you don't even it's so far away in our mind,
mm,
it's so far away from our reality that it's very
mm,
hard to get there. And
yeah,
we do that exercise in every master classes I give of imagining, picturing my dream life. We don't go
mm,
directly to the retire to retirement, but I can see in people's faces that it's very hard to imagine because we are so stuck in a little box of what's
yeah,
possible in our little sample that dreaming beyond it's really challenging usually.
yeah. I think for a lot of people, um, I remember I used to talk to my mom and I would say, "What do you dream?" And she's like, I don't have dreams. I just live in the life that I have been given. And I used to think that was really, I don't know, depressing.
Mm,
And I just wanted, I just wanted something different.
right.
I wanted to paint a future that I wanted. I think for some people there are so many external requirements, and finding a way through those requirements is so difficult, or there's just so many of them that thinking about what they want, it's just not, it's very difficult.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you think it was a little bit of a key factor to have that financial planner helping you guys think about this and questioning?
Yes, I think that was a huge deal. It was someone objective, and it doesn't have to be a person. There is software now that you can do it on your own, but it's kind of like the idea of having a coach. There is a human that is asking you questions, and you are in some ways a little more accountable to give a good answer.
Yeah.
And they're a little bit more challenging, right? Okay, but do you really need this, or why not this? That human conversation, I think, helps a lot.
All right, all right. Okay. So that brings us to the question of so what does teen do today? How's your life today?
Mm. So I had a list of things I wanted to do right after retiring. And even now, to say I'm retired feels a little weird. Sometimes I say I'm semi-retired.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
like that word
yeah.
too.
And retired has a, there are people who say, "Oh, I love what I do. I'm never going to retire." Okay. There are some people who have a life that's very much in their own control. But when you're tied to a corporate kind of environment, or I have to be online at 9 o'clock, I only get so long for lunch, and I know when I have, and then people want me to answer emails at 10 o'clock at night. That's not anywhere close to retired. Okay. For me, the things I wanted to do was I wanted to be able to have lunch with friends in the middle of a weekday
Okay.
without worrying about getting back for a meeting after lunch. I wanted to be able to go to the cafe and look at the sun and look at the sea at 10 o'clock in the morning, again, without worrying about emails, Slack messages, and all the other ways we have to communicate. I, um, I wanted to take more painting. I wanted to take more time to do my paintings and to learn more styles of painting, and to get to a point where the paintings would be completely mine, where the idea generation would be completely mine. And I knew that would take some time and some different kinds of learning. I wanted to join a choir, which I did.
Nice.
So that turned out very nice. And you could say, well, you can do that when you have a job. Except for me, I would get so exhausted by the end of the day. That is one thing that did change as I got older, is I just got more tired. By the end of the day, I was just much more tired. And so trying to do some of these things when you're that tired in the evening just did wasn't for me. Um, and then coaching, right? So COVID came and I didn't have a lot of IT contracts. And the world was very sad, and I was sad along with it. And I was living in a very rainy Braga apartment,
Yeah.
not able to go anywhere during the day. So I decided to start doing more research into happiness and the science of happiness. And kind of through that path, I found my way to life coaching, And so that I do as well these days.
All right, all right. So you're working individually with people, helping them think, do a little bit of the work that you already did.
Yes, yeah, I primarily work one-on-one. I am working on an idea to do a retreat,
Mm,
so that would have multiple people at it. But yeah, primarily one-on-one, and a combination of people who, let's say, they got laid off for a really really long time and they're thinking of changing their career, or something happened in life and they want to make it look, they want to make their life look different. I haven't specifically worked with anyone who's moving to retirement, but that's another kind of a change that would happen that
yeah.
would make a lot of sense. Some people make a change and then they're just not happy with the change, and so then they're like, now what do I do? And so yeah, it's often a change of circumstance. Um, Things didn't turn out as I planned. Um, I want life to be different, and sometimes, in some cases, it's I've lost my confidence to be able to do it on my
Mm,
own.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, all right. Awesome. So do you feel like you are living what you planned out or what you dreamed of before? Similar? How do you feel
Yeah,
about that?
yeah. So we definitely increased our gym outings. So I'm feeling much more healthy. The thing about working from home, and I loved a lot of things about working from home, but sitting in a chair for 8 hours a day was not one of them. So it's
Yeah, it's
not
tough.
good on my body. So I much prefer to be out and about and moving. So that's nice. The only step that we're not quite there yet is we actually are building a house in Portugal, which for anyone who's ever done that knows it is a long and painful journey that teaches you a lot of patience. So we're still
Yeah.
about 8 months, probably 8 months away from having the house complete, and then I think the painting, the story will be complete. Right, that's the last step of the conversion. Actually, there's one more step to the conversion that Roger and I are now going to proceed to get Portuguese citizenship.
Okay,
So that's
nice.
kind of the final step in the painting.
All right. Awesome, awesome. So we usually do a final question here in the podcast, which I believe it will be very interesting to listen from you. So, um, if you knew what you know today, so if you knew what Thene knows today, what would you say to 20-year-old Thene in the beginning of her career?
Um, I would probably say
Okay.
be braver, be bolder, um, and sort of step out into public speaking sooner.
Okay. Do you think she would listen to you?
Hmm. I think if there were someone who, if I'd had a coach or a confidant, if I'd had an older sister or a friend who was what they were telling me,
Hmm.
I think perhaps I would. But I didn't have someone quite like that. And I had champions at work, but um, there were a few instances where they helped,
Of
and
course.
I took some bold steps, but I don't think I did enough.
All right, all right. Would that be the same advice that you would give to people now? Like our audience are around there 28, 35, 40, 45.
Yeah. It depends on the person. Some people, I think it's a custom message to each person, right? That's always good advice. Be bolder, be braver, and learn public speaking. That's always good. But different people need other advice, right? And that's why, you go look for a coach or a confidant or a mentor. I actually just recently signed up with the Women in Technology Mentoring Program.
Yes,
So
yes.
I start with a mentee. I'm her mentor in about a week or so. So I think you need to look for who that might be and, walk through what your own fears are and your own dreams and hopes and find a champion.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Thene. Thank you so much once again for accepting the challenge, my invite. I think it was really a wonderful conversation. I will take a lot of inspiration from here, from your experience, from the things that went well, not so well, from your plannings, from your dreams. So I will healthily steal some of those
Absolutely.
and apply in my own life. So thank you once again.
Thank, thank you so much, Mariana. This was a very fun conversation, and I do hope it's helpful for everybody.
Olá, bem-vinda ou bem-vindo ao Tekya Talks, um podcast sobre carreira, sucesso e desenvolvimento pessoal. Perguntas desconfortáveis para pessoas inquietas. Junta-te a nós nesta jornada pessoal e profissional.